Whether you're pulling over a stolen vehicle or a person with warrants, this is how to do a felony stop in ERLC. First, let's briefly discuss what a felony stop or high-risk stop is. A felony stop is usually performed on a stolen vehicle or if the registered owner of the vehicle has an outstanding felony warrant. Some of the benefits of doing a felony stop over a regular traffic stop is 1. The ability to overwhelm a suspect with numbers. 2. Lower the risk of injury if the suspect becomes combative. And 3. Having sufficient units to engage in a vehicle pursuit if the suspect flees the traffic stop. Making sure your felony stop is properly organized may be the difference between a peaceful apprehension and a dangerous pursuit. Our first scenario is the lone officer pulling over a car for speeding or running a stop sign or for whatever traffic infraction they committed. After running their plate and running their information, you find out they have a warrant or it's a stolen vehicle. What you do next is call in additional units so that you can set up your felony stop. Our second scenario is that same lone officer witnessing a vehicle commit a traffic infraction. However, before he pulls the car over, he decides to run the plates, and it comes back as either a high-risk felony warrant or comes back as a stolen vehicle. What the officer starts to do is go over the radio and communicate with other units to request them to follow in tandem with him so that when he pulls this car over, they can immediately do their felony stop. And there you go. As you can see, once he has a couple units behind him, he decides to light the car up, and immediately the officers behind him get into felony stop position, preparing to do their felony stop on that vehicle. They don't have to wait around. He doesn't have to wait suspiciously behind his car. Immediately, even if the car decides to run away, he already has 4 units in that vehicle pursuit. As soon as you call in over the radio that you're doing a high-risk traffic stop, you should already start coordinating with your units to make sure that you have sufficient units to block down the neighboring street so that the general public doesn't get within the line of fire or is stuck behind your felony stop line, because in the worst case scenario, you may end up with a barricaded suspect inside of their vehicle that refuses to come out. Once you have sufficient units on scene, if you haven't already, you can exit your vehicle and start giving commands to the driver. Some example commands include telling the driver to turn off their vehicle, telling them to drop the keys out of their window, telling them to put their hands out of the window, and telling them to follow all further commands issued. Our first scenario is the most common scenario, and that's where the driver follows the officer's commands, exits the vehicle, walks backwards with their hands up, stops when the officer tells them to stop, and gets on their knees before an arresting officer goes and puts them into handcuffs. After they're into handcuffs, the remaining officers make an arrest team and move in to clear the vehicle. Our second scenario is where a suspect is verbally uncooperative or just semi-uncooperative, meaning they are fully barricaded inside of a vehicle, but at the same time they aren't following commands the way they're properly supposed to be followed. You can see here a suspect is backing up like the officer said, but then he starts dancing away and mocking the officers. He may be trying to lure them in so that he can hit them with something inside of his waistband, so you can never be careful. So one officer decides to deploy a beanbag round, which drops the suspect to the ground, and they start cooperating with all further commands. An officer goes in and cuffs the suspect, brings them back to the patrol cruisers, and the remaining officers go in to clear the vehicle, making sure that it's fully clear, and then they declare it Code 4.